Chapter 21, Loki 1. The cunning trickster deity Loki, the enigmatic figure in Norse mythology, embodies the archetype of the cunning trickster deity. He is known for his intelligence, shape-shifting abilities, and his unparalleled knack for causing chaos. Throughout the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, Loki's character is vividly illustrated through his various exploits, ranging from playful mischief to sinister deception. Loki in the Poetic Edda. The Poetic Edda, a collection of Old Norse poems, provides several accounts of Loki's trickery and cunning. One of the most vivid portrayals of his disruptive nature is in the poem Lokasenna, where Loki boldly interrupts a banquet of the gods. During this feast, he engages in a series of sharp exchanges, insulting and provoking the gods, revealing their weaknesses and flaws. In Lokasenna, Loki's taunts are not mere jokes. They expose uncomfortable truths and deep-seated tensions among the gods. For example, he mocks Odin for his inconsistency, chides Frigg for her infidelities, and accuses Thor of being a coward. These jabs are designed to unsettle and create discord, demonstrating Loki's role as a catalyst for conflict and change. Excerpt from Lokasenna. Why, Odin, you boast so high? When it's by deceit you've won each victory? Speak not of courage, when cowardly art the feats you've won through treachery. This passage underscores Loki's ability to see through the facades of others and to use his sharp wit to disrupt and challenge the established order. Loki in the Prose Edda. In the Prose Edda, written by Snorri Sturluson, Loki's character is explored through a series of stories that highlight his ingenuity and deceitful nature. One of the most significant tales involving Loki is his role in the death of the god Balder. Loki's envy and malice lead him to orchestrate Balder's demise by tricking the blind god Höður into shooting Balder with a mistletoe arrow, the only thing that could harm him. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. Loki, out of spite, arranged for the blind god Höður to throw a dart of mistletoe at Balder, the only thing that could harm him. Balder fell dead, and from this act, the gods' doom was sealed, and the shadow of Ragnarok began to loom over Asgard. This act of treachery demonstrates Loki's capacity for malevolence and sets in motion a series of events that lead to Ragnarok, the apocalyptic end of the Norse gods. It highlights Loki's transition from a mere trickster to a harbinger of destruction. Shape-shifting and deception. Loki's shape-shifting abilities are a central aspect of his trickery. He can transform into various forms to achieve his ends, showcasing his adaptability and cunning. In one myth, Loki transforms into a mare to lure away a giant stallion, thereby preventing the giant from completing a fortress and claiming his reward. This act results in Loki giving birth to Sleipnir, an eight-legged horse who becomes Odin's prized steed. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. To thwart the giant's plan, Loki took the shape of a beautiful mare and distracted Svitolfari, the stallion. Thus, the construction was delayed, and in time, Loki bore Sleipnir, the swiftest and most graceful of all horses, which he gifted to Odin. This episode not only highlights Loki's versatility, but also his significant, albeit unintended, contributions to the Norse mythological world. Loki's evolution and legacy. Throughout the Norse myths, Loki evolves from a mischievous trickster to a figure associated with darker themes of betrayal and chaos. His actions often have profound and far-reaching consequences, affecting both gods and humans. Loki's intelligence, resourcefulness, and complex nature make him a compelling figure who embodies both creation and destruction. Despite his antagonistic role, Loki's character remains captivating because he challenges the norms and disrupts the complacency of the divine order. His legacy as a trickster deity is defined by his ability to navigate between playful antics and profound treachery, making him one of the most intriguing figures in Norse mythology. Loki's character. Loki's character in Norse mythology is multifaceted and complex, making him one of the most intriguing deities in the pantheon. He is not easily categorized as purely good or evil, but instead embodies a range of traits that fluctuate between extremes. Loki is known for his intelligence, charm, and resourcefulness, as well as his capacity for deception and malice. The duality of Loki's nature is explored through various myths and stories in the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, revealing a character who is as capable of causing mischief as he is of performing acts that have significant, often catastrophic consequences. Loki's intelligence and wit. Loki's sharp intellect and quick wit are central to his character. He often uses his cunning to outsmart others, like whether it's for personal gain or to help the gods out of difficult situations. One of the most illustrative examples of Loki's cleverness is found in the myth, where he prevents the giant master builder from completing the fortifications of Asgard on time. The gods had promised the builder the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya if he could finish the walls in a single winter. Realizing the dire consequences if the builder succeeded, Loki devised a plan to sabotage the construction. He transformed into a mare to distract the giant's powerful stallion Svadilfari, thus delaying the work and causing the giant to fail. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. Loki, knowing the stakes, transformed himself into a mare and lured Svadilfari away. As the stallion chased Loki into the woods, the builder was left without his powerful helper, causing him to miss the deadline and lose the wager. This story highlights Loki's ability to think on his feet and manipulate situations to achieve a desired outcome, often using his shape-shifting abilities to aid his schemes. Loki's role as a deceiver. Deception is a key element of Loki's character. He often uses lies and trickery to achieve his goals, whether they are self-serving or part of a larger plan. His deceitful nature is perhaps best exemplified in the story of Baldur's death, where Loki's machinations lead to one of the most tragic events in Norse mythology. Baldur, the beloved god, was rendered invulnerable to all things except mistletoe. Loki, aware of this, crafted a dart from mistletoe and gave it to the blind god Höður, guiding his hand to throw it at Baldur during a game. The dart struck Baldur, killing him instantly and plunging the gods into mourning. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. Loki, in his envy and spite, forged a dart of mistletoe, the only thing that could harm Baldur. He gave it to the blind Höður and guided his hand, ensuring the dart found its mark, thus bringing death to the most cherished of the gods. This act of treachery underscores Loki's willingness to betray even the closest bonds, revealing a darker aspect of his character that leads to immense suffering and sets the stage for Ragnarok, the end of the world. Loki's relationship with the gods. Loki's relationships with other gods are marked by ambivalence. He is both a companion and an adversary to many of the deities. His interactions with Thor, for instance, oscillate between camaraderie and antagonism. In several myths, Loki accompanies Thor on his adventures, providing clever solutions to tricky problems, yet he also mocks and challenges Thor, highlighting their complex dynamic. In the story of Thor's retrieval of his stolen hammer, Mjolnir, Loki's cunning proves indispensable. Disguising himself and Thor as women, Loki helps Thor infiltrate the giant Thrym's hall to reclaim the hammer. Yet, despite his aid, Loki never misses an opportunity to jest at Thor's expense. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. When Thrym demanded Freya in exchange for the hammer, Loki devised a plan to dress Thor as the bride. They traveled to Jotunheim, where Thor, disguised, reclaimed Mjolnir. Though the plan succeeded, Loki's quips and laughter at Thor's predicament were unrestrained. This tale illustrates the dual nature of Loki's relationship with Thor. While he provides crucial assistance, he also revels in the mockery and discomfort of his companion. Loki's evolution from trickster to villain. Over time, Loki's character evolves from a playful trickster to a more sinister figure. Initially, his pranks and schemes, although troublesome, often have humorous or relatively harmless outcomes. However, as the myths progress, Loki's actions become increasingly malevolent and consequential. This shift is poignantly captured in the myth of Loki's punishment. After the death of Baldur, the gods finally decide to take action against Loki. He is hunted down, captured, and bound in a cave, with a venomous serpent placed above his head. The venom drips onto Loki's face, causing him immense pain, and he writhes so violently that his movements create earthquakes. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. Bound with the entrails of his own son, Loki lay in torment as the serpent's venom dripped onto his face. Sigyn, his loyal wife, held a bowl to catch the poison, but when she left to empty it, the venom fell upon him, and his writhing shook the earth itself. This punishment reflects the culmination of Loki's transition from a mischievous deity to a bringer of calamity, whose actions ultimately contribute to the downfall of the gods at Ragnarok. Loki's character is a rich tapestry of cleverness, deceit, and transformation. His stories reflect his journey from a trickster who disrupts the divine order for amusement to a figure whose actions precipitate the ultimate downfall of the gods. 3. Sigyn, Loki's wife. Loki's third wife is portrayed in Norse mythology as a loyal and devoted spouse despite Loki's tumultuous reputation. She bore Loki 2 sons, Narv and Vali, with Vali being named after the god who avenged Baldur's death. Even after Loki was cast out of Asgard and imprisoned beneath the earth, Sigyn remained steadfastly loyal to him. In Norse mythology, Loki was often seen as a malevolent figure, and people feared him greatly. Unlike other gods who were worshipped and revered, Loki had no temples dedicated to him and received no sacrifices. Instead, he was associated with noxious weeds, and natural phenomena like the overheated atmosphere of summer were interpreted as signs of his presence. For example, when the sun seemed to draw water, it was said that Loki was drinking. The story of Loki is closely intertwined with other Norse gods, and many myths involving him have been recounted. There are 2 notable episodes left to mention. One that shows Loki's more positive attributes before his descent into deceitfulness, and another where he ultimately persuades the gods to commit murder, disrupting their peace. For detailed references from Edda or saga texts pertaining to this, you may consult primary sources such as the Poetic Edda, particularly the Lokasenna and other poems, and the Prose Edda, Gylfaginning and Skaldskaparmal. These sources provide comprehensive accounts of Loki's character and his relationships within Norse mythology. 4. Scrimsli and the peasant's child Dread filled the humble cottage of the peasants. Their cherished son, Eirik, had unwittingly become a pawn in a perilous game with Scrimsli, a towering giant known for his cunning ways. Scrimsli had wagered and won, claiming Eirik as his prize the following day, unless the desperate parents could hide him in an impossible manner. Appealing to Odin, the Allfather, they implored him for aid. With a wave and an ancient incantation, Odin transformed Eirik into a single grain of wheat among countless others in a vast field. Yet Scrimsli, with his keen senses, swiftly approached the spot where Eirik lay hidden. Just as the giant was about to seize the grain, Eirik's cry alerted Odin, who swiftly intervened, returning the boy to safety, albeit temporarily. "He will return," Odin cautioned gravely. "Seek help elsewhere." The next day, the peasants beseeched Honir, the god of wisdom. With a touch of divine magic, Honir transformed Eirik into a wisp of down, nestled within a swan gliding serenely across a nearby pond. Moments later, Scrimsli lumbered into view. Ignoring the cottage, his gaze fixed upon the swan, sensing the presence of Eirik. With a sly smile, he moved to capture the bird. Yet before harm could befall the down, Honir intervened, rescuing Eirik once more. "I can do no more," Honir lamented. Scrimsli's determination is formidable. With their hope fading, the peasants turned to Loki, the mischievous trickster god. A glint of mischief danced in Loki's eyes as he whisked Eirik far out to sea, transforming him into a tiny egg concealed within the roe of a flounder. Returning to shore, Loki encountered Scrimsli preparing for a fishing expedition. "May I join you, giant?" Loki inquired, masking his true intent with false camaraderie. Unaware of Loki's deceit, Scrimsli welcomed the company. As the giant cast his line, Loki watched intently. Soon enough, Scrimsli reeled in the very flounder containing Eirik. With cruel precision, the giant examined the fish until he discovered the hidden egg. Eric's fate hung in the balance, but Loki seized the moment. In a swift move, he snatched the egg from Scrimsli's grasp and restored Eirik to his human form. "Run, Eirik, back to your home," Loki urged urgently, pointing towards the distant cottage. "Do not look back." Eirik sprinted for his life, the enraged Scrimsli thundering behind him. He reached the boathouse, slamming the door shut just as the giant's massive form filled the doorway. Anticipating Scrimsli's pursuit, Loki had laid a cunning trap. With a resounding crash, the giant collided with it, collapsing in agony. Seeing his chance, Loki severed Scrimsli's magical connection, leaving the giant roaring in frustration as his power waned. Overwhelmed with relief, the peasants hailed Loki as the savior of their son, praising him as the mightiest of the gods. While others had offered only fleeting solutions, Loki had secured Eirik's freedom once and for all. 5. The trickster's bargain. Unease settled over Asgard like a thick fog. Bifrost, their shimmering bridge, and Heimdall's ever-watchful gaze offered a semblance of security, but the fear of frost giants breaching their defenses lingered. To fortify their celestial home, the Aesir gods decided to build an impregnable fortress. Lost in deliberations, they were interrupted by a stranger, an architect with an intriguing proposition. He offered his unmatched skills in exchange for a seemingly impossible reward: the sun, the moon, and the radiant Freya, goddess of beauty. Indignation flared amongst the gods. The audacity, they boomed, on the verge of banishing the insolent architect. But Loki, the cunning trickster, saw an opportunity for mischief. "Hear me out," he interjected, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Let's propose a counterbargain, one so outrageous he'll surely fail." Intrigued, the gods listened as Loki spun his web. They would agree to the architect's outrageous demands, but with one crucial condition: the fortress must be completed within the unforgiving grip of a single winter, and solely with the help of his extraordinary steed, Svadilfari. The architect, blinded by his ambition, readily agreed. He wasted no time, working tirelessly through the day and hauling colossal stones by the light of the moon. Svadilfari, a magnificent horse with boundless strength, seemed to match his master's tireless pace. Winter's grip tightened, and with it, anxiety rose in Asgard. The architect's work neared completion, leaving only a single gateway unfinished. Panic surged through the gods. The thought of losing not just the sun and moon, but also Freya, the embodiment of their world's beauty, was devastating. Desperate, they turned on Loki, their frustration palpable. "Fix this, trickster!" they roared. "We didn't expect him to actually succeed." As twilight descended on the final day, Svadilfari, muscles straining, hauled a massive stone towards the gateway. Suddenly, from the shadows of a nearby forest, a captivating whinny pierced the air. It was Loki, transformed into a beguiling mare, luring Svadilfari away from his task. Enthralled, Svadilfari forgot his duty. With a powerful kick, he freed himself from the harness and galloped after the alluring mare. His enraged master, the architect, gave chase, determined to regain control of his steed. Loki, reveling in his trickery, led them both on a merry chase deep into the forest, devouring the precious hours of darkness. By the time dawn's light painted the sky, it was far too late to finish the work. The enraged architect, revealed to be a powerful frost giant in disguise, stormed back to Asgard, intent on retribution. But before his wrath could consume the Aesir, Thor, the mighty god of thunder, returned from his travels. With a mighty swing of his enchanted hammer, Mjolnir, he struck the giant down, ending the threat. Though saved for now, the gods' victory was tainted. Their reliance on trickery and violence would have unforeseen consequences, ultimately contributing to their downfall and the prophesied Ragnarok. However, Loki felt no remorse. In fact, his mischief would take an unexpected turn. During his flight with the mare, an encounter that would later result in the birth of Sleipnir, the eight-legged steed destined to become Odin's magnificent mount. This audacious act cemented Loki's reputation as the arch-deceiver. His love for playing pranks and his penchant for lies would forever brand him as the Prince of Lies. 6. Loki's last crime. Loki, the trickster deity of Norse mythology, is known for many misdeeds, but it was his final crime that cemented his role as a malevolent force and led to his ultimate downfall. This crime was the orchestration of Baldur's death and his refusal to show any remorse for the act, which ultimately sealed his fate and resulted in his expulsion from Asgard. Baldur, often depicted as the most beloved and pure of the Norse gods, was invulnerable to all things except mistletoe. The gods, relieved by this near invulnerability, would often throw objects at him, knowing they could cause him no harm. Loki, driven by jealousy and spite towards Baldur's purity and the affection he garnered from others, discovered the one vulnerability that could bring Baldur down. In a sinister plot, Loki fashioned a dart or spear from mistletoe and cunningly tricked the blind god Höður into throwing it at Baldur during one of these harmless games. Guided by Loki, the mistletoe weapon struck Baldur, killing him instantly and plunging Asgard into deep mourning. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. Loki, discovering that mistletoe was the only thing that could harm Baldur, shaped a dart from it. During the god's play, he handed this dart to the blind Höður and guided his aim. Unknowingly, Höður threw it, and Baldur fell dead. This act of treachery was not only a personal attack on Baldur, but also a grievous blow to the entire pantheon, leading to immense grief among the gods and signaling the beginning of their decline. The refusal to weep after Baldur's death, Hermother, another god, was sent to Hel, the realm of the dead, to negotiate Baldur's release. Hel agreed to release Baldur on one condition: every being in the cosmos had to weep for him. The gods, hoping to bring Baldur back, traveled across the realms, urging every creature to shed tears for him. All complied except for one figure, an old giantess named Thuk. She refused to weep, saying that Baldur had brought her no joy in life, and she saw no reason to mourn him in death. This giantess was none other than Loki in disguise, further demonstrating his unyielding malice and contempt. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. Loki, disguised as the giantess Thuk, refused to shed a tear for Baldur, sealing his fate in Hel. She said, "Let Hel hold what she has," thus denying Baldur's return to the living. Loki's refusal to weep for Baldur was the final confirmation for the gods of his unredeemable nature. His obduracy in this moment, when his single act of contrition could have undone his earlier crime, solidified the gods' perception of him as wholly evil and beyond redemption. The sentence of banishment. Loki's actions, culminating in his refusal to mourn for Baldur, convinced the gods that there was no remaining good in him. They saw his deeds not merely as mischievous pranks, but as profound betrayals and acts of malevolence that threatened the very fabric of their existence. In unanimous agreement, the gods pronounced the sentence of perpetual banishment on Loki. This marked his final separation from the divine realm of Asgard and symbolized his complete fall from grace. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. Realizing that nothing but malice remained within Loki, the gods condemned him to perpetual banishment from Asgard. He was hunted down, captured, and bound with the entrails of his own son to lie in torment until the end of days. Loki's banishment was not just a physical exile, but a symbolic expulsion from the community of the gods. It underscored the irrevocable break in the bonds of kinship and trust that once linked him to the other deities. The consequences of Loki's actions. Loki's final crime and his refusal to atone for it set off a chain of events that led to his ultimate punishment and the onset of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. Captured and bound, Loki was sentenced to an agonizing imprisonment. A venomous serpent was placed above his head, its poison dripping onto his face, causing him excruciating pain. His loyal wife, Sigyn, stayed by his side, catching the venom in a bowl to spare him, but when she had to empty the bowl, the venom would fall on him, causing him to writhe in agony and shake the earth. Excerpt from the Prose Edda. Bound in the cave, Loki endured the serpent's venom. Sigyn stayed beside him, catching the venom in a bowl, but when she left to empty it, the poison dripped onto Loki's face, making him writhe in agony, his convulsions causing earthquakes. Loki's punishment reflects the severity of his betrayal and serves as a powerful symbol of the consequences of unchecked malice and deceit. His story is a cautionary tale of how even the cleverest and most resourceful beings can fall into ruin through their own actions. Through these narratives, Loki is revealed as a figure who evolves from a mischievous trickster to a malevolent entity whose actions bring about profound suffering and cosmic upheaval. His final crime against Baldur and the subsequent refusal to show any remorse or empathy highlight the depths of his character's transformation and his ultimate estrangement from the gods he once lived among. 7. Aegir's Banquet. A pall of sadness hung heavy over Asgard. The gods, burdened by the treachery of Loki and the loss of the beloved Baldur, found little joy in their grand halls. Seeking to lift their spirits, Aegir, the mighty god of the sea, extended a warm invitation. "Come," boomed his voice, echoing through the realms, "to a feast in my coral halls, nestled deep beneath the ocean waves. Let us forget, for a brief moment, the grief that gnaws at our hearts." Hope flickered in the eyes of the gods. A chance to escape the crushing sorrow, to raise a cup in merriment, was a welcome prospect. So at the appointed hour they descended, clad in their finest attire, a forced cheer upon their faces. The banquet hall was a marvel. Glistening coral formed the walls, illuminated by bioluminescent creatures that cast an ethereal glow. Laughter, for so long absent, filled the air as the gods recounted tales of past adventures and shared hearty meals. Yet a single seat remained empty, a poignant reminder of the radiant Baldur. Suddenly, a dark shadow fell across the revelry. It was Loki, the trickster god, his presence unwelcome and a stark contrast to the joyous atmosphere. The gods exchanged uneasy glances, a sigh escaping the lips of Freya. "We have no welcome for you here, Loki," boomed Odin, his voice heavy with disappointment. But Loki, ever the instigator, ignored the Allfather's command. A torrent of insults flowed freely from his lips, his words seeking to disrupt the festive mood. "Look around you," he sneered. "Not a single friend among you, gods and elves alike." The merriment evaporated. Anger flared in the eyes of the gods, particularly when Loki turned his malicious gaze upon Fimafeng, Aegir's loyal servant. In a fit of jealous rage, Loki struck Fimafeng down, shattering the fragile peace. Outraged, the gods rose as one, their expressions fierce. Thor, his grip tightening around his mighty Mjolnir, thundered, "Leave this place, Loki, or face the wrath of the storm." Loki, sensing the imminent danger, slunk away, disappearing into the depths of the hall. But his respite was short-lived. Driven by an insatiable need to stir chaos, he crept back, his tongue dripping with accusations. He mocked their flaws, their past mistakes, reveling in the discomfort he caused. "Enough!" roared Thor, his patience wearing thin. Mjolnir crackled with power, a silent threat that Loki understood all too well. With a final mocking laugh, the trickster god vanished once more, leaving the gods to ponder the weight of their grief and the ever-present threat of Loki's mischief. 8. The Pursuit of Loki. After causing the death of Balder and refusing to mourn him, Loki knew that his days of roaming free were numbered. The gods would never forgive his deeds, and he foresaw that they would soon hunt him down, seeking either to bind him or end his life. With this grim certainty, Loki retreated to the rugged mountains far from the reach of Asgard. In the solitude of the wilderness, Loki constructed a cunning refuge. He built a hut with 4 doors, each facing a different direction and always left ajar. This ensured that he could escape quickly in any direction should the gods come for him. The hut stood near the Frenangr Force, a powerful waterfall that cascaded down the rocky cliffs. Loki's mind was a constant whirl of schemes and counter-schemes, and he devised a plan to evade his pursuers by transforming into a salmon and hiding in the turbulent waters below. One evening, as the setting sun cast long shadows over the mountains, Loki sat in his hut, his nimble fingers working swiftly to weave a net from twine. He pondered his plan, aware that while he could slip through hooks and grasping hands, the gods might use a net like that of Ran, the sea goddess, to catch him. He needed to ensure his escape route was foolproof. Suddenly, a movement on the horizon caught Loki's sharp eyes. Odin, Kvasir, and Thor were approaching. Their figures loomed larger as they closed in on his hideaway. Realizing that his time was up, Loki acted swiftly. He threw the unfinished net into the fire, where it sizzled and burned, leaving only charred remnants behind. Bursting through one of the open doors, he raced to the waterfall. In a heartbeat, he transformed into a sleek salmon and plunged into the frothing waters, seeking refuge among the stones at the bottom of the stream. Moments later, the gods reached the hut. They searched it thoroughly, but it appeared empty. Odin's keen eye noticed the smoldering remains of the net on the hearth. He gestured to the others, and they gathered around the fireplace, pondering its significance. Kvasir, wise and perceptive, spoke first. "This net, or what's left of it, suggests Loki's plan. He might have transformed into a creature of the river. We should weave a similar net and drag the stream. It's the most logical way to flush him out." Thor, nodding in agreement, replied, "If Loki seeks to evade us as a salmon, we'll catch him in his own trap." With grim determination, they set to work, fashioning a new net from sturdy materials. Once finished, they moved to the waterfall and cast the net into the waters. The first drag of the stream proved futile. Loki, now a salmon, skillfully evaded their efforts, hiding between 2 large stones at the bottom. But the gods were relentless. They weighted the net to reach deeper and tried again. Loki sensed the danger, and with a powerful thrust of his tail, he leaped upstream, narrowly escaping the grasping mesh. On their third attempt, the gods spread the net wide and swept it through the entire breadth of the stream. As the net tightened, Loki, still in his salmon form, saw no way out. In a desperate bid for freedom, he leaped high into the air, shimmering in the last light of day. Thor, with the reflexes of a warrior and the strength of a god, was ready. He lunged forward and caught the leaping salmon in mid-air. His grip was like iron, and though Loki wriggled and twisted, he could not break free. Thor held him fast by the tail, his hold so firm that the salmon's body tapered sharply at the end. a feature that would forever mark the species. Thor's voice thundered across the stream. "I have you now, trickster! Your schemes and transformations won't save you this time." Loki, unable to transform back into his true form while in Thor's grasp, thrashed helplessly. The gods had finally caught their elusive foe, and they would soon mete out the punishment he had long evaded. 9. Loki's punishment. After being captured by Thor, Loki was dragged before the assembled gods, his shape-shifting abilities rendered useless by the mighty grip that still held him fast. His defiance had finally led him to this dire fate, and he could no longer escape the consequences of his actions. Sullen and silent, Loki resumed his true form, the arrogant glint in his eyes now replaced by a sullen resignation. The gods, grim and determined, bound him tightly and began their journey to a remote, dark cavern, far from the light of Asgard. There, they would mete out a punishment fitting for the architect of such chaos and destruction. The cavern was cold and forbidding, its shadows deep and impenetrable. Once inside, Loki was forced down onto a jagged rock that jutted out from the cavern floor. With steely resolve, the gods prepared his bonds. No mere ropes or chains would suffice. Instead, they used materials that signified the severity of his punishment. As they secured Loki, Odin chanted a somber prophecy. "Thee on a rock's point, with the entrails of thy ice-cold son, the gods will bind." The gods worked in silence, their faces set in hard lines, each lost in thought about the pain and sorrow Loki's treachery had caused. Once Loki was securely fastened, Odin transformed the bonds into unbreakable adamantine iron with a flourish of his hand. Skadi, the giantess who personified the cold mountain stream, stepped forward, her eyes alight with fierce satisfaction. She carried with her a large serpent, its eyes gleaming with malice, and its fangs dripping with deadly venom. She positioned the serpent directly above Loki's head, securing it so that it would drip its poison unerringly onto his upturned face. But Loki was not to suffer entirely alone. Sigyn, his faithful wife, approached quietly. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, but there was no hesitation in her movements. She held a large cup, which she placed under the serpent to catch the venom before it could strike her husband's face. Sigyn's devotion was unwavering, and she took her place by Loki's side, her every gesture filled with a tender resolve. Despite her tireless vigil, there were moments when Sigyn had to leave to attend to other matters. During these brief intervals, the venom would drip onto Loki's face, causing him excruciating pain. His body would convulse and twist in agony, and his cries would echo through the cavern, shaking the very earth above. In this torment, Loki would remain until the arrival of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. On that fateful day, his bonds would finally break, and he would rise to join the final battle. In the cataclysmic struggle that would ensue, Loki and Heimdall, the ever-vigilant watchmen of the gods, would face each other in a final, deadly duel. Both would fall, their destinies intertwined in mutual destruction. Loki's punishment was a grim reflection of his deeds, a fitting end for the trickster who had brought so much turmoil to the realms of gods and men. And through it all, Sigyn remained her silent vigil testament to her unyielding love and loyalty. 10. Loki's Day. In the transition from Norse mythology to the Christian era, the gods of the old pantheon underwent significant transformations. Loki, once a complex figure embodying both mischief and chaos, was reduced in status and identity as the new religion took hold. The once powerful and cunning trickster god found himself equated with Saturn, another deity who had been stripped of his former divine majesty and reimagined as a demon. Both Loki and Saturn were recast in the role of Satan, symbolizing evil and deceit. The transformation of Loki's day before Christianity's influence, the last day of the week was dedicated to Loki, reflecting his importance in Norse culture. This day was known as Laugardag in Old Norse, meaning wash day. This designation likely stemmed from the tradition of weekly bathing, a customary activity among the Norse people, and indirectly tied to Loki's chaotic yet integral role in their mythological worldview. As Norse culture evolved and interacted with neighboring societies, the significance of Laugardag changed. In English, it became Saturday, a name that carries a story of its own, influenced by both Roman and Germanic traditions. The English name Saturday appears to be derived from the Roman god Saturn. However, in the context of Norse mythology and Germanic linguistics, there is an intriguing twist. The day was sometimes referred to as Satyr's Day. Satyr in Germanic mythology is often linked to the Teutonic god of agriculture and harvest, who was a representation of Saturn. But deeper beneath this surface, some scholars suggest that Satyr might have been another personification of Loki, reflecting his trickster and ambush qualities. Loki, in his guise as Satyr, was seen as a thief in ambush. This title aligns with Loki's well-known reputation for deceit and subterfuge, always lurking in the shadows ready to stir trouble. This reinterpretation, under the influence of Germanic culture, shows how Loki's role morphed from a divine figure in the Norse pantheon to a demonized entity, mirroring the agricultural and time-related attributes of Saturn, while also encapsulating the unpredictability and trickery Loki was known for. The connection with Saturn. Saturn's role in Roman mythology as the god of time and agriculture made him a fitting parallel to Loki in this transformed context. Both figures were seen as agents of change and upheaval, often with destructive or destabilizing consequences. As Christianity spread across Europe, Loki and Saturn were conflated with Satan, further cementing their roles as harbingers of chaos and symbols of the old, now demonized pagan world. The transition from Laugardag to Saturday reflects the broader cultural shifts and syncretism that occurred as Christianity supplanted the old religions. The reimagining of Loki as a demonic figure aligns with the broader demonization of pagan deities, who were often recast as evil entities in the Christian worldview. This transformation highlights how the cultural and religious shifts of the time were reflected in the changing names and significances of days of the week.